Who are the 5 players that are seeing their draft stock rise? Well, we're going to talk about it on today's Audible. Cecil Lammey here, Sigmund Bloom on assignment. We got to start with Cam Ward, quarterback from Miami. It looks like now he may not be the number one quarterback in terms of rankings, and certainly as a pocket passer, I believe Shadur Sanders is much, much better. But in terms of the number one overall pick, it's just looking more and more like it is Cam Ward. And the physical attributes, of course, the Ward has, they're off the charts in terms of his arm strength, his athleticism, his improvisational ability. Can't even say that word, but you know that he can make plays when there's no play to be made. That's the type of player that Cam Ward is. And right now, it just seems more and more like the number one pick to the Tennessee Titans is going to be Cam Ward. Unless they're blown out of the water, it seems like Shadur Sanders is not even an option for them. And in fact, if we talk about players on the rise, that's certainly Ward as the number one pick. And if we talk about players sliding, maybe that's Shadur Sanders. There's some mock drafts out there that have Shadur falling out of the first round, which I think is ridiculous. You have some former scouts on Twitter pumping their chest about how they'd have an undrafted grade on him, which again, I think is just stupid. 2 rules in life: don't be dumb, don't be in a cult. And well, I think that's dumb and cultish behavior to not say that Shadur Sanders isn't a tremendous pocket passer. He doesn't have the athleticism that Cam Ward has, doesn't have the arm strength either, but last I checked, you can still be a great quarterback and not have those 2 attributes. And Cam Ward is a guy that it's going to require the right fit. I think that's the dirty secret when it comes to all quarterbacks is you got to go to the right fit. Cam Ward is a player that can, make plays when they're not there. As I mentioned, with his improvisational ability, he's the type of player that you can put out there with minimal talent around him and he'll make plays. And Tennessee, as they rebuild, we'll see what direction they go with if Cam Ward is that guy. But he's a player that is less system specific than Shadur Sanders. Shadur Sanders is more of that pure pocket passer. He's got to go to the right system, the right fit. The teams that may have interest in Shadur Sanders, maybe not the right fits unless he falls all the way to the Pittsburgh Steelers there in the 20s, which again is a possibility. But players on the rise, that's certainly Cam Ward already, at the start of this thing in the top 10 conversation, now looking more and more like that number one overall pick, and certainly a fantasy asset to begin with because he can run and he can make plays. So that can always lead to top 10 fantasy success. Let's talk about the top 10, but in a different way, in a player that I'm not sure, I'm not going to say deserves to be in the top 10. I'm not going to say, like there's no way this guy should be there, but it's interesting that Jackson Dart, the quarterback from Ole Miss, is a player that is getting mocked into the top 10. I think 7 to the Jets is something that you've seen there as well. Looks like the Giants with both Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson, they would be out of the quarterback market there at 3. But yeah, Jackson Dart, a player that I saw at the Senior Bowl, and his tools, his physical tools are fine. Scott McLuhan told me years ago, former GM of Washington, years ago, he told me the physical stuff is easy to see. So when I talk about Jackson Dart and I say, I don't think he's worthy of a top 10 pick, doesn't mean he won't get picked in the top 10. Doesn't mean he won't get picked in the first round. Some team might trade back into the end of the first round to get that 5th-year option on Jackson Dart. This quarterback class isn't really good at all. There's a couple of guys, and they're going to be throwing literal darts at the draft board if you're picking, Quinn Ewers or Jackson Dart or whoever. But I look at Dart as kind of a Drew Lock type of quarterback where physically you see the gifts and then you see the maddeningly inconsistencies, right? That's what you see with Jackson Dart's game. So from a physical standpoint, does he have the arm? Does he have the leadership? Can he see over the line? And is he, good in the pocket? Is he good on the run? You've seen all those things on film with Jackson Dart. You just haven't seen him consistently enough as a player that basically you're handing the reins to your team to be the CEO as a top 10 pick, especially if he goes to New York. That would be, and again, there with Justin Fields, you'd think, all right, well, they have an open competition. Is it Fields' job? And then Dart, develops behind him. Why would they do that then? It's the Jets. We'll see if Darren Muji kind of does things a little bit differently there with New York, and how much Woody Johnson's kid plays into the role of, kind of assistant GM there, as the rumblings or kind of the jokes around that team. The jokes around the Jets abound. Sorry to Chase Stewart, but like that's Jackson Dart to the Jets. Jackson Dart in the top 10. I have a hard time believing that'll happen. Again, this is not last year's class where we had 6 quarterbacks in the top 12, all very deserving, although JJ McCarthy had a second round grade on. Like I look at this quarterback class and I like Shadur. He's my number 1 quarterback, great pocket passer, limited athletically, like Cam Ward, big arm, athleticism, wild game, can make off platform throws. And then after that, I really don't want Jackson Dart or Quinn Ewers or really any of these other guys, unless we're talking about value picks, end of day 2, something like that. But it's a quarterback desperate league. We may see a guy like Jackson Dart sneak into, let's not say top 10, let's just say first round. And let's say Omarion Hampton sneaks up the draft board there as well. Now, this depends on where Ashton Jeanty goes, because Ashton Jeanty is the number 1 running back in this class, no doubt, no question. And the number 2 back is debatable. And I'll talk about another one who may be the number 2 back in this class. But Omarion Hampton is there as the Jeanty light. I believe it was Mel Kiper that said on ESPN that if you looked at Jeanty and then you looked at Hampton, there's really not that much difference between the two. Like the gap between the two isn't as large as some would think. Okay, that's debatable. I personally have Hampton as an early second round pick in terms of his grade. And Jeanty, I think, is the 3rd best player in this class. I believe it goes Travis Hunter, number 1, Abdul Carter, number 2, Ashton Jeanty, number 3. So Jeanty should go to the Raiders at 6. That seems to be the way. No one's really kind of stepping off that or denying that Pete Carroll wouldn't love to have that ground game. And if you start, listen, you got Geno Smith, whatever, he's okay. But if you have Jeanty and you have Brock Bowers, it's a hell of a combination to start with, and then figure out your quarterback later. Kind of important, but you might have to figure that one out later, as it looks like, they're out on Shadur Sanders as well. So if Jeanty goes 6 to the Raiders, then the question becomes, where does Omarion Hampton go? Now, what's interesting is the Bears in terms of Vegas. The Bears are the number 2 favorite team to get Jeanty. I think it's plus 120 for the Raiders and plus 130 for the Bears. So that was odd. It was curious, put talent around Caleb Williams, but you got a couple of nice backs. Maybe they want differently. Maybe they want Omarion Hampton. We've got the Cowboys at 12. Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders don't really do anything for me. So, maybe that's an option as well. The Denver Broncos lingering at 20. Omarion Hampton may be the player that Sean Payton looks at and sees his Alvin Kamara 2.0. That could be Omarion Hampton. So his draft stock is on the rise, but so is the draft stock here of TreVeyon Henderson. Now with Henderson, he doesn't have the power of a Kamara, but he's certainly got that speed and explosiveness. He doesn't have the power of Omarion Hampton either. Omarion Hampton is a power player. Hampton reminds me of a young Javonte Williams, pre-injury Javonte Williams. Remember, Williams shredded his knee. He was a different player before this. So post that knee injury, Williams hasn't looked the same, but as a younger player, he looked like Omarion Hampton. I think Hampton has better vision. TreVeyon Henderson, to me, I've called the most Kamara-like in this class, mainly because of his receiving ability. He is a dangerous receiving option, not even out of the backfield. You can line up him at the slot. You can have him run routes. It's more than just the Texas routes or swing routes or screen passes that he can catch. He can run routes, which is a very rare attribute for a running back. Plus, he's super quick, super explosive. What's odd is when I talked to TreVeyon Henderson at the Combine, and I said, "You remind me of Kamara," and he's like, "Yeah, I've never thought of that." So, he brought up different backs. Christian McCaffrey, I believe, was one of the backs that he brought up. And you can see some of that to his game as well. TreVeyon Henderson now, based on what happens to Omarion Hampton, this running back class has roughly 24 draftable running backs that can play, even some undrafted guys. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. I always say, somebody get Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, just give him a chance. The Arizona back. And he'll be, 7th round undrafted. But if Omarion Hampton goes early, let's say the Bears take him, or the Cowboys at 12, and then now you're the Broncos at 20, you go, okay, we're going to take TreVeyon Henderson. So even in a draft class that is the deepest running back class that I've ever seen, and I'm old, Uh, this is a situation that bears watching because Travion Henderson could be, a guy that now moves up in that first round. And I think he's a second round graded player, but still very fast, very quick, great receiver out of the backfield there as well. Keep an eye. Speaking of fast, let's talk Matthew Golden here, Texas wide receiver. And the wide receiver conversation is interesting because, one, what do you consider Travis Hunter? Is he a wide receiver? Is he a corner? Is he both? He's a unicorn. He can do both. I believe it was my buddy Matt Miller that said he could be Odell Beckham Jr. on one side and then Denzel Ward on the other side. Like, okay, cool. I like that. Sounds great. But if you're Matthew Golden, wide receiver from Texas, Xavier Worthy comes to mind. All right, really fast, take the top off the defense. And the wide receiver pecking order may not be Tedero McMillan, the Arizona prospect, as the number one receiver. Now, he's my favorite receiver in this class. Again, Travis Hunter is a unicorn, so let's put him out of the conversation because, I don't know what a team's going to see him as. Some teams that I've talked to say corner, some teams I've talked to say wide receiver, some teams say both. So whatever, putting Hunter to the side for just a moment. Matthew Golden, he is that straight line receiver. If you think of, okay, where's Luther Burden in this one? Where's Tedero McMillan in this conversation? Igbuka, the Ohio State kid, like where's this wide receiver talk going? Matthew Golden may be the guy that people just say he's our favorite receiver because he can take the top off the defense and we know what he can do after the catch. He's got speed. He can go the distance. He can make field flipping plays regularly. So Golden might be a player that his draft stock is on the rise because there is, I don't want to say confusion, let's say debate in the kind of NFL draftnik world of who is the number one wide receiver in this class. And the final player that I want to talk about today is a little bit of lanyap here for an extra player. I said there's 5. There's actually another, and it's Terence Ferguson. Now, the Oregon tight end certainly turned heads with his 40 time at the combine, and he's a player that caught a lot of passes from Bo Nix. I believe the Broncos should have interest, even though they got Evan Ingram. I still believe they're drafting a tight end. Perhaps Terence Ferguson works his way into the second round. Don't think he's a first round pick. Don't even think he's a second round pick. I have a third round grade on him, but still, there's a bump. This is guys that are improving their draft stock. Terence Ferguson with that 40 time certainly did that. And, now with his playmaking ability, with his size, basketball skill set, he actually plays basketball with Bo Nix and has a tomahawk dunk, is what he told me at the Senior Bowl. So Terence Ferguson, Colorado prospect from Littleton, an Oregon tight end, is certainly a player on the rise. That 40 time got people to look back at him and go, oh, it's just more than that system. And if we look at Oregon, yeah, it's more than the system. They had playmakers. Bucky Irvin last year, Bo Nix, Troy Franklin, a little rough as a rookie season, had that big touchdown catch, though, in the wild card game against Buffalo. So Terence Ferguson is my 6th player here for a little bit of lanyap when it comes to players whose draft stock are on the rise. Speaking of the draft, make sure you get Football Guys Draft Guide. Go there, get it free. Footballguys.com. It's our draft guide. Lots of great detail and information about this draft class. Everything you need to know from a draft lens, from fantasy lens, our Football Guys draft guide there as well. All right, check it out, footballguys.com. I'm Cecil Lammey. Like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bells so that you never miss a vid. Be safe, be kind, know that you are appreciated. Thanks for watching, everybody. Stay tuned, and would you please stay frosty.